Is your practice tired of wrestling with insurance denials, deciphering EOBs, and watching your revenue slip through the cracks? You are not alone. Welcome to The Claim Game, the podcast designed to cut through the confusion and provide you with the best practices for revenue cycle management success. We are Jeremy and Catherine Zug, and we've been with people just like you in the trenches. Each week, we'll break down complex billing processes, share real-world solutions from practices like yours, and ask questions of the game makers and changers of healthcare so you can take control of your revenue. Let's turn those claim denials into deposits and help you return to focusing on patient care. It's time to win the claim game.
Hey everyone, welcome back to The Claim Game. I'm your host, Jeremy Zug. As a reminder, Catherine is out on maternity leave. And if you're new here, we treat revenue cycle management like the high stakes board game that sometimes it feels like it is. Every claim is just a roll of the dice and every denial feels like a penalty card. And your goal, as always, is to navigate the board, collect on what you've worked for, and claim victory for your practice's bottom line. And in this season of the claim game, we're moving piece by piece through revenue cycle management best practices. And last time we were here, we talked about a high-level overview of payment posting and the moment that cash actually hits the bank. And today we're going to be zooming in on the evidence. Today we're going to talk about remittances and portals. And if payment posting is collecting your money, then remittances are like a scorecard. Without them, you might have cash in the bank, but you're really flying blind without a remittance. And a portal is like a fast pass to skip the line and avoid the hold music and get the answers that you need to win. So if you've ever looked at a bank deposit and wondered, what is that payment for? What patient, what date of service, or you looked at a denial and thought, what language is this written in? This episode is your strategy guide. And today we're not just talking about theory, but we're going to walk you through some specific tools from our Hourglass Learning Hub that'll change how you read these documents and provide you with the right orientation to make remittances readable, I suppose. So let's get started. Let's define this particular space on the game board, if you will. In the revenue cycle management world, a remittance advice, or RA, is the communication from the payer explaining their decision on a claim. Now, a lot of people use the term EOB and remittance interchangeably, and while they share a lot of the same DNA, there's a critical distinction. An explanation of benefits, while can be received to the provider, is most often used when a patient is looking at an EOB. You're going to get a patient in the office and they're going to say, I received an EOB. And they're talking about the document that the insurance company sent to them explaining your service. You may receive an EOB and it will explain the services you provided to an entire swath of patients. And so it's important to get that distinction right. The remittance advice is a professional version sent to the provider, normally electronic. However, for today's episode, we're going to look at the paper version of this, the standard paper remittance. We're going to call it an EOB, and we're going to break that down. Because if you treat a remittance like junk mail, you're leaving your practice vulnerable a variety of ways. And so you can't treat that particular piece of physical mail like junk mail. So I want you to visualize a tool that we have in the Hourglass called the Guide to the Components of an EOB. If you have it, if you're a member of the Hourglass, you can pull that up. But if not, if you look at a standard EOB, it's not just a receipt, it's a line level detail of the services you completed for a given time frame. And you really need to be a detective here, right? According to our guide, there are some critical components you just can't ignore, right? So to start, you have to look at the top of an EOB. I know it sounds basic to look at a header, but This is where the check number is, the payer address, and if you need to appeal a claim on this particular explanation of benefits or remittance, you're going to need that address and you're going to need that check number and the claim numbers that are included, right? The claim level data is below that, and that's where the patient's name and the specific claim ID live. The claim ID on the remittance is often different from a claim ID that is generated from your electronic health record. So mapping those two things is really important. Service line details are next, and this is really the good stuff, the meat of the document. And this shows the CPT codes, what you did and the date of service, and then the financials, right? So the billed amount versus the allowed amount. And here's kind of a trap. A lot of practices look at the paid amount and stop there and move forward. And you need to look at the allowed amount. The difference between what you billed and what's allowed is your contractual adjustment. And if that number's off, either your fee schedule is wrong or the payer is underpaying you. And we'll get to that in a minute. But there are codes associated with those, right? And this is the most critical part of the guide that we have in the hourglass. And you're going to see codes like PR, that stands for patient responsibility, or CO, which stands for contractual obligation. So PR-1 is a deductible. PR-2 is coinsurance. PR-3 is a copay. You'll also see CO-45, and it might say the charge exceeds the fee schedule. So you're going to get an explanation of the payment or the benefits that the insurance company paid your practice. If you don't understand the difference between a PR code and a CO code, you're going to bill the patient for money they don't owe, or you're going to write off money you should have collected. And those are the little things, the 5mm adjustments that chip away at your bottom line. And it's really how you get an unsustainable practice, right? So next, let's talk about the digital pipeline for the same process, right? This is a level up. An EOB is almost always paper when we use that term. And ERA, electronic remittance advice, is electronic. Paper is slow. Paper is snail mail. And if you want to play this game at an elite level, you need to move from the EOB, paper, to an ERA. And this brings us to the second tool. And we have this exclusive to our Hourglass members, and it's called the Guide to the Components of an ERA. So what's an ERA? The technical name for an ERA is an 835 file. It's a stream of data, zeros and ones, sent directly from the insurance company's computer to your electronic health record system. And in our guide to the components of an ERA, we break down how this file differs from the paper version. The biggest difference between an electronic remittance advice and an explanation of benefits is speed. It arrives days, sometimes weeks before paper does. Then there's the component of automation. A lot of electronic health record systems are allowing for auto posting. And the danger of auto posting, and while we love automation, it saves time, but there's a huge but there. But you can't just set it and forget it. The ERA file contains complex data segments. For example, there's a provider level adjustment. Have you ever had an ERA file that didn't balance, right? You billed $100, they paid $80, but the check was only for $70, right? The paid amount is for $70. That missing $10 is usually buried in something called a PLB segment. It's a provider level adjustment at the bottom of the ERA. And that could be for a recoupment where they took money back from a previous patient to pay for an error that they made 3 months ago. It could be for a variety of things. And sometimes those provider level adjustments require some follow-up. So you don't want to just set and forget automation, because you can miss some of those smaller, I don't want to say nickel and dimes, because $10 can make, on a lot of volume, can make a huge difference. So if you don't know how to read an ERA, feel free to sign up for the Hourglass Learning Hub. We have our guides for the components of each of those, and that'll give you the right orientation that you need in order to read ERAs and EOBs really well. You'll see that the discrepancy between some of those payments, and assume the insurance company shorted you on this patient, and you could be billing the wrong person, or you'll waste hours on the phone. So here's your strategic move. Use ERAs for speed, but audit it against the logic in the guides that we've given you. Make sure your software is handling those recoupments correctly, or you're going to find your billing ledgers to be a total mess by the end of the year, and you may not be able to recoup any of that.
One mistake in your notes can cost you a reimbursement. Blueprint helps providers avoid that by writing smarter documentation, flagging issues early, and getting claims out the door faster. Check the show notes for the link to give it a try for free.
All right, moving forward, let's talk about portals. Portals are like a secret weapon in this game. So we have the scorecard, which is the remittance, so the ERA or EOB, but let's talk about the rule book and the fast pass, which is the payer portal. In the old days, quote unquote, if you had a question about a claim or a missing remittance, you spend probably 45 minutes on hold listening to distorted elevator music and hoping and praying that you didn't get disconnected from that call. Today, if you're calling a payer for something routine, you're just playing billing in hard mode for no reason. Portals like Availity or Optum or specific payer sites like Navinet are a direct line of sight into the payer's world, into their information database. So why are portals the winning move here? And there's the hidden remittance hunt, right? So in this scenario, which we see all the time, providers see a deposit come into the bank via electronic funds transfer, for example. You give yourself a little high five and you move on. But that money doesn't just sit there. That money has to be assigned to patients within your system. You don't want to post that money yet. A deposit without a remittance is like a box with no packing slip. It's like there's something in the box, but what is it, right? Did they pay for a session? Did they pay for a lab? What day did they do that? Did they pay for an intake? What did they do? So the move is that if an ERA doesn't come through, go to the portal, and you can usually download a PDF copy of that remittance instantly, and you can match it to the cash before you post it. Now, the other benefit for why portals are something of a fast pass comes down to correction speed, right? A lot of portals now allow for online corrections. So you don't have to reprint the claim, write corrected claim in red Sharpie, and mail it in, right? You can log in, change what you need to change, fix the modifier, add the original claim number, and hit submit. And it processes in days instead of 30 days or weeks, what have you, right? So the portal is really the ultimate source of truth for eligibility and benefit checks and accuracy in payment posting. We don't want to just rely on what somebody says. We want to match what remittances and EOBs are saying against your contract and your fee schedule. So to give you a real life example in a case study, I want to walk you through an actual project that we did with a pretty large agency several years ago that highlights how important it is for you to have an academic and forensic process around remittances and portals. So years ago, there was this agency that contacted us because they knew that something was wrong in their billing, but they didn't know what was wrong. They didn't even know where to look to find out what could have gone wrong. But they just knew that the revenue that they were receiving from their payer spread didn't match management's expectation of the sessions they were doing or the fee schedules that they had. I mean, they were a talented group of folks and they knew that there was a mismatch. They just didn't know where to look. And so oftentimes agencies and practices turn to practice solutions to find out exactly where to uncover those issues, right? Which stones to turn over. So we always start with a practice health check, which is exactly that. We're checking the health of your practice or your agency, and that term is a little less scary than audit. So we don't like to use the A word, but we did our practice health check, took several days, and at the end of it, we were able to match several remittances, several EOBs against the fee schedules that this agency had. And I know that 75 cents or a buck doesn't sound like a lot per claim, but when you're dealing with the kind of volume that some of you are doing, 75 cents or a dollar makes a giant difference. And you can start to, if you're doing this math in your head in the car or what have you, you can tell how much anxiety that caused. So what we did was we engaged with this agency in order to work alongside, shoulder to shoulder, with the insurance company in question that had been underpaying claims for some time. And we worked with the billing department to put together the documentation that we needed in order to prove the case that we had. And several months went by, as these things do, but eventually that agency was paid the difference, and it was a pretty significant payment that came in. This highlights that they were doing one thing really well, which is that they had moved this agency had moved all of their payments to ERAs, which allowed the speed of the audit and the subsequent correction of this issue to go much faster. If we had to thumb through reams and reams of explanation of benefits, I don't know if that project would have even been worth the doing to fix that. And so they did some things right. And then once we were able to recoup the underpayment, then what we did was we set up a process with the billing team that always checked against the contract and the payment that was posted to make sure that everything came in that needed to be there. But a lot of that is the education around contractual obligation codes and patient responsibility codes and portals. We were able to, over the course of that project, it was about 60 days, we were able to drop their accounts receivables by 30 to 40%, able to collect in cash a lot of that. And that just cleans up a whole mess of claims for that particular organization. So the bottom line is that the remittance is a source of truth for your practice. It's not the source of truth because your contract and your fee schedule are really the ultimate sources of truth, but you can match those two things up. If the remittance is a source of truth, the portal that the payer has is there for speed. And if you can match those two, you can bridge the gap between my source document and speed. You can really win the revenue cycle management game, right? You don't have to memorize all these codes that we're talking about. You don't need to memorize what a loop 2100 is in an ERA file. You just need the right cheat sheets. And we've made those guides in the Hourglass, which is why we released the Hourglass in the first place, so that you can have the guide to the components of an EOB and the guide to the components of an ERA available right now. So if you want those guides, you can head over to the website, check the show notes for a link to the Hourglass, download those guides, print them out, hang them in your office, study them. And the next time a confusing ERA or EOB comes in or a denial, take a look at those and take the next steps that are recommended. And that's it for this territory for now. The next episode, we're going to be moving to denial management. You really won't want to miss that. It's been a pleasure. I'm Jeremy Zug, your host. Keep rolling the dice in revenue cycle management, and we will see you next time. Thanks, everybody.
If you enjoyed today's episode of The Claim Game, please take a moment to leave us a rating and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. It really helps new listeners to find us. Make sure you never miss an episode by subscribing to The Claim Game on your favorite podcast app. Your feedback means so much to us. We want to provide valuable education about revenue cycle management. So if there's something we didn't cover in our topic that was a burning question for you, please let us know so we can try to get you the information you desire. You can find the links to all resources we mentioned in this episode in the show notes. And if you want to dive deeper into our resources, we have two places you can do that. First, you can go to our blog at practicesol.com/blog, where we have 8 years of educational blogs. If you want to learn more about what Practice Solutions does, reach out. We'd love to hear from you. Just go to practicesol.com to learn more and to connect with one of our awesome people on our team. Thanks for listening. We are Jeremy and Catherine Zug, and this is The Claim Game. See you at the game table next time.